Hi, hello. It is Josh Bowe, not Kirk Henderson, coming to you live. If you're listening to us live, it's about 9:10 Central Time. It is Tuesday, June 20th. As of this moment, we are about 48 hours from the, give or take 48 hours from the 2023 NBA draft. If you're not listening to this live, you're even a little bit closer. This will be going up on your podcast feeds Wednesday morning. So welcome. This is Pod Maverick. This is Josh Bowe from MavsMoneyball.com and Pod Maverick. As you'll notice, if you're watching on the screen next to me, you'll see our staffer, Logan Thompson. Logan, thanks for joining me tonight.
Good to be here.
Yeah. And you'll notice that Kirk Henderson, in charge of everything, in charge of Pod Maverick, in charge of MavsMoneyball.com, he is not here tonight. He somehow scheduled a vacation this week. He will not even be, I think he's in like Mexico or he's not even going to be in the country when the draft happens, which is it's just really funny, especially if you know Kirk, because he doesn't miss anything and I have to beat him with a stick to get him to take time away from his computer and time away from the site and the podcast. So it's very funny that like the most important Mavericks draft and since Luka's been drafted.
And then before that, like a decade.
Yeah.
The second most in 12 years or something.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But we're here, and I didn't know this is kind of an off-the-cuff show. Logan graciously gave his time tonight, kind of spur of the moment. I think he had an evening off from real life duties, so we really appreciate him joining. And I didn't really have necessarily like a rundown of what I wanted to talk about. It was more just I just wanted to get a show in before the draft, just to kind of go over our final pre-draft thoughts. Nothing too much has changed in terms of rumors or news since we've last talked, since you've last heard something on this feed from Kirk. But, we still kind of want to go over like what everyone's kind of feeling, what our final thoughts are before the draft happens on Thursday. I think the first thing I wanted to lead off with is a theme that I've noticed, and I kind of tweeted about it earlier today. And Logan, I know, I talked about it in our Slack, and it's just funny to me. If you go to any major mock draft, for instance, let's go to the Athletics mock draft, which dropped earlier today. Athletic Mavericks beat writer Tim Cato, that I'm sure many of you are all familiar with, did the Mavericks selection at 10. The first thing he writes after his selection, he selected Jalen Hood Schifino, the guard from Indiana. Hopefully I didn't butcher his last name. But the first thing he wrote in his blurb was, every mock draft is finding it difficult to predict Dallas's pick because it's probably not going to be Dallas picking. You go to the Ringer mock draft, and Kevin O'Connor in his blurb for the Mavericks, halfway through his blurb on Taylor Hendricks, who he mocks to the Mavericks at 10. But will the Mavericks keep this pick? Sources say they are trying to move down for multiple picks or players, or out of the draft entirely. NBA insider and reporter Mark Stein, who you guys know is very close to the Mavericks. He's based out of Dallas. He used to write for Dallas Morning News before going national. He was on local Dallas Fort Worth radio today, the Ben and Skin show. Y'all are familiar with Skin Wade, Mavericks television announcer. It's just so funny. Mavs Film Room, we appreciate them on Twitter aggregating this. They listened to the radio interview. Stein says there have been rumblings from the Mavs this week to not count them out of actually selecting someone at 10. He still thinks the Mavericks will make some kind of trade, stresses they won't make a move just to get off money. And I'm sure you can load up the CBS mock, the ESPN mock. They all say this, and it is just unbelievable how the consensus for again, this is a top 10 pick. This isn't like 15 or 18 or 24 or 26. And this is a team that just finished 10th place in the Western Conference. Like, it's not that they missed the play. They didn't miss the 8th seed by a game. They weren't a 500 team. They were they had 38 wins. They were under 500. They finished 10th in the Western Conference. And by far, every single expert, plugged-in media person, the consensus is they're not going to use their 10th pick. They're not going to draft a player. And that's just crazy. Like, regardless of where you fall on, they should trade the pick, they should keep the pick. That's just so funny to me. Like, it's just so overwhelmingly, well, they're not even going to draft a player. And it makes this a little crazy to talk about the draft because it kind of feels a little pointless. I don't know, Logan, how do you feel about it?
Well,
it's driving me nutty.
After Stein said that there is a chance that they would draft someone, I was like, it would be very appropriate if we played like armchair GM all week and then they just took a guy.
That would be funny.
Like, it would be funny. But I think trading back and getting a vet is pretty responsible if the top 9 is gone and you genuinely think that there's a teardrop. Because if they thought there was a teardrop because they actually believe in prospects later, they've done all their work, and they care about this draft like they should, which who knows, maybe that wouldn't be the case. But I think you can say it's like playing the draft appropriately if they think we should trade back, we could get someone within our same tier, et cetera, et cetera. But then the idea that it's such a foregone conclusion is kind of what makes you feel a little icky because you're like, well, you might have someone fall back to you. Like y'all been saying in the Slack, it seems like it never goes completely chalk. So it's like I'd like to give them credit for perhaps figuring out where their tier drops off and working from there, because I think that's like a responsible way to use your pick. But just because they don't really ever prioritize the draft, I don't think it's as much that as it is a number 10 pick can't help us. Like a young person, we have to get better faster. You know what I mean? So it can be frustrating for sure that that's the case. But yeah.
And, you know, I wrote a piece earlier, like if you've been following me on Twitter and you read my piece, my 3 favorite prospects that could fall in that 10 range are Taylor Hendricks, Anthony Black, and Jarris Walker. I'm exceedingly losing hope that Jarris Walker is one of the 3 that, like, I think I might just need to whittle my big 3 into a big 2 with Anthony Black and Taylor Hendricks.
Jarris is the one that makes me like, even with Hendricks and Black, I'm like, what could we get for the 10 pick? Blah, blah, blah. But if it was Jarris Walker and they traded, I would be like, he's perfect fit.
Yep.
But yeah, those are the 3 that seem realistic, or even somewhat realistic in Jarris Walker's case, that, you know, I could probably get behind. I think the other ones would be kind of reaching, and maybe if you could get back to 15, like the Hawks thing, I don't think it would be that disastrous of a decision. But yeah.
Right. And I think that's the big thing, and I think that's what drives everyone a little crazy, is that we don't know, you know, hypothetical trades already drive me crazy because there's so much that goes into trading that we just don't know. Like, there's relationships between front offices. You do not know what a GM values a player, that, like, you value a player when you're trying to create these fake trades. Like, there's just so many factors that we just don't know about. It can be fun to talk about, but for me, it just drives me nuts because I'm just like, I want to know what's happening. I want to deal in hypotheticals. But
I think we're probably more in a land of hypotheticals than we even realize, because we've had just enough rumors for people to be like, maybe this is what could happen. Mm-hmm. And then the recurring thing is like tons of teams have talked to them. And like, it all depends on who's available, and the way the draft plays out could mean this other team has a deal kind of like talked out with the Mavs that's just like the foundation, and then all of a sudden this guy's available at 10 and they're willing to give more. Like, it's kind of like so many dominoes that could fall. So I feel like even the fake trades that we're looking at are like 1 out of 50 possibilities. So it's just
right, because the Mavericks don't know the true value of 10 until they're on the clock, because you don't know who's going to be there. It's way different than, you know, if you're picking, you know, near 1, 2, or 3. You know, Charlotte and Portland have been talking about trading those picks. Well, it's a lot easier because you can assume there's a lot more finality in terms of who's going to be there. at 10, there could be any number of guys that are available that you just don't know that can make the pick either more valuable to certain teams beneath you or less valuable. So,
well, it's smokescreen season too. Like that is a real thing. Last year, it was up until draft night. Everybody thought Jabari Smith would be the first pick, and that was just a complete, So it's
yeah. I mean, guys go to work out. Guys choose not to work out with teams. They might choose to do something different during their workout with a certain team over another. You're right. Like it is total smokescreen season, which almost makes me wonder, like the way that the Mavericks have flooded the rumor market with this, like they're trading 10. I'm trying to figure out, like, is there even like what would be a benefit of the entire league believing that you're going to trade this 10th pick? Like, how does that work out in your favor? Because I don't know if that necessarily changes how the teams ahead of you are gonna pick. I don't know. I feel like that gives you worse leverage when you're talking to teams to trade. Like if teams think you're just desperate, dead set to trade this pick, I feel like that's going to make it harder to get what you want from other teams. So I don't even like. I'm trying to figure out if there's something to that, or if it's just the Mavericks being the Mavericks, and
that's true.
Know that they don't like the draft.
My thought was that if a lot of teams are trying to trade for it, then other teams are going to be like, no, we really need that guy. But you're right that it also makes it like, well, you guys have to trade out of it anyway, so you'll take this. So I don't think it really works, quite that way. But the Derek Lively thing kind of seems like Mavsy. Like, I think he could go lottery, but the idea that, like, all these teams are specifically trying to get to 10 to get him, for some reason, that seems like, I don't know why. Like the Hawks have Capella and Okongwu, and I guess they'd be trading Capella to us, but a lot of it's just kind of fuzzy, and I'm like, I don't know. This doesn't all make sense, but
yeah, I could see the Mavericks are so desperate for front court help. It would not shock me if they kind of put the feelers out there that are like, hey, we're going to take Lively at 10 if we stay, just to get these teams that are at 13, 14, 15, the teams that more fit Lively's projected range, maybe to get them anxious to trade. Maybe they're trying to juice the value at 10 there. That would make sense to me because, like you said, Lively at 10 just doesn't. Considering what would be available there, even if the top 9 goes chalk, even then, Lively at 10 is a little bit of a stretch considering like some of there's going to be still some really good guards left. There's probably going to be a couple of decent forwards, maybe not the ones you want, but like still really talented players. So
see that whole range that's all kind of like flawed guard creator types, like Grady Dick's there too, like offensive centric players. I feel like getting ahead of the pack to get the one you wanted, that's kind of who I always saw as going to 10. It's like if they want Kobe Buffkin, if they want, I guess also Koulibaly. So there's still people, that I can see. Koulibaly isn't like the people I was describing, but there's like a lot of different avenues I could see people wanting to trade up. But Lively, it would have to be that the shooting and workouts has been insane. But like Matthew said, he wrote an article about Derek Lively. If anybody hasn't read it, it just seems like a stretch to be that sure off of workouts because people always blah, 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 shoot really well in workouts. And like, he didn't have great touch from the free throw line. And there's certain reasons that I don't think you can gamble that much on that. But for Derek Lively to go 10, I feel like that has to be because the workouts is shooting.
And what's so funny about like Lively to the Mavericks at 10 is the only intel we're getting from media people is that they want to trade 10 because they want a win now veteran. They want more win now contributors. Like they don't have time to wait for a 10th pick to develop. Lively, like, is probably going to take the most time to develop of most of the guys that are projected in that like 7 to 15 range. So it's like, how can you go from we want to trade this pick for some guy that's going to help us right now to, oh, well, if we keep it, we're going to take one of the guys that's probably going to take one of the longest to come along and play big rotation minutes for a playoff team. Like that part, that's where a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. Like it's either one or the other. Do you want to win now veteran, or do you want to take someone with high upside that you can develop a little bit? And that's where like the smokescreen kind of aspect of it comes in for me.
Right. Yeah. It would be hard for me to believe if Hendricks or Black fell that they wouldn't take them, but
yeah. I'm starting to Hendricks is just he fits everything they need in terms of like plug and play. to play off Kyrie and play off Luka. And then, man, Black is the guy he was kind of like outskirts for me in terms of how much I liked him. A lot of it was just like, okay, Kirk, like you like this guy because he went to your high school, like settle down. And then, you talked on Kirk's pod. I've listened to a lot of other people talk about him. And then I just watched his game more. And the way that he could be like that the thing I keep coming back to is he feels like, he could be Lonzo Ball to the Luka and Kyrie, like how Lonzo was the connective piece between Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. Like, I feel like Black could be that for Kyrie and Luka. And I've seen a lot of people wonder, like, well, you can't take Black. Like, he's a point guard. They've already got Kyrie and they've already got Luka. And I think the big thing with Black is it's like the way for him to get on the floor more and contribute is to not be a lead guard, is to be someone that can play off ball, that can attack closeouts, that can make the extra pass after Luka and Kyrie have already kind of initiated the action. Much like what Lonzo Ball did when he was in Chicago. Like Lonzo Ball in Chicago, like that team was 27-11 in the 35 games they played with Lonzo before he got hurt. I think they were first in the Eastern Conference. And Lonzo wasn't running a bunch of pick and roll, like high pick and rolls, like every single possession. Like he was letting LaVine and DeMar DeRozan do the work as lead ball handlers, and then he would kind of fill in the gaps where they needed it offensively, whether it was keeping the ball moving, attacking closeout, making a cut. And then defensively, like you don't really, Black is kind of, it's self-explanatory with Black if you just watch him for a little bit in terms of what he could bring on defense. So Black is a guy that I've really fallen in love with. Although, like I said, Hendricks, Walker, does Whitmore fall? I don't know. Any of the guys that are in the consensus top 9, like I will do cartwheels if one of them lands the 10.
Well, the thing about the kind of theoretical fit is I feel like Mavs fans kind of like, because of the way the front office has built and the way it's always talked about the way you have to build, kind of like can't imagine something different than the kind of like stringent way we've built. But quick decision making and really intelligent players who are also good on defense, you will start to see that even though your spacing is a little bit iffier, you can start to see the dividends get paid. You can start to see how the offense can change if everyone on the court can dribble and pass. And I think we haven't seen that, so we don't even know how to process. Like Luka, it may be kind of an adjustment for Luka, whatever. But in Anthony Black's piece, or at some point, I wrote about how Sam Presti talked about building the team he has now, how they're all extremely quick decision makers, and they really don't have that much spacing. And obviously, Oklahoma City is not, some kind of thing to achieve, but just the fact they keep drafting these guys and it's starting to work, and it's mostly about ball handling, and everyone on the court is extremely intelligent. I think Luka, Kyrie, and a guy like Black, if you have one other shooter, I can start to see how that becomes just a really like intelligent, forceful. I mean, you'd have Black and Luka able to drive and pressure the paint. Like you can kind of start to see how that would work, even if the spacing would be a little problematic. I think it would kind of be a different sort of thing than we've seen since Luka's come into the league. But I don't really get dissuaded as much of that as I do people who think Black will be like a star, because I do kind of think he's going to end up being this kind of like connective Derek White, but bigger kind of wing. I feel like that's an awesome outcome though. But that's more my idea, is that I don't necessarily think he's going to has all this tons of star upside as much as I think like his shot. I don't know. I think his shooting will come along. Those are just things you have to work through. But if you give that much other stuff, I think you can defend like choosing him or playing him or building that way.
Right. And I think two things I want to jump off of from what you were talking about. The way you're talking about, like, we just don't see players like this in Dallas, so it's just a lot to take in. It would be different for Luka. I think I wrote about this in my piece earlier this week. You touched on it. You wrote a really nice piece last week. Guys, if listening to this, go check the site that Logan wrote. I don't have it off the top of my head, but you wrote a piece kind of centered, not necessarily all about Black, but just in terms of that archetype of player and why taking a player like that when you already have Luka and Kyrie makes sense. And it's because the NBA is just consistently shifting and changing. And I feel like, we had those mid-2000 rock fights where, those Detroit, Indiana playoff games that were like 75-72. final scores. Remember Mavericks with Dirk living in the mid range, and those games would be rock fights too, even though it was a little bit more higher scoring. Then you started to slowly transition into that pace and space era that kind of started with the Mavericks 2011 title. I think they they were the first like 3-point shooting NBA champion compared to the teams before, the decade before them. Then you get in through the Warriors, and now we're kind of evolving. When the Warriors and the Mavericks won the title, 2011 to like 2015, and 3-point shooting becomes more important. There was still like the defensive specialist that was starting to get phased out. Like I remember Chicago, like in 2011, the Derrick Rose MVP year when they were the number 1 seed, they still started like Keith Bogan as their 2 guard. And it was like these teams would just start these like 2 or 3s that had no offense, but were like good defenders. The Mavericks, hell, with Deshaun Stevenson, even though
I was about to say we had Adrian Griffin Sr. There was like a long run of our 2 guard being
yeah. And then the rest of the league was doing that. And then in the 2015 playoffs, the Warriors played the Grizzlies, who had Tony Allen, who was like the apex of that archetype of player, like all defense player with zero offense. And the Warriors just played 5-on-4 basically. And it was in the second round series. I think they were down in the series. It was the first time they were down in a playoff series in that playoff run. And they just didn't. Whoever guarded Tony Allen just played free safety, and they ignored him. And I noticed from that playoff series going forward, there was a big rise in like you need 3-and-D wings, 3-and-D wings, 3-and-D wings. You've heard that term ad nauseum if you've read any NBA content, listen to any NBA podcasts. 3-and-D wings was like the most premium role player type position after your star, offensive generator type archetype. And now we're starting to slowly transition from, teams build all these guys. They have like Luka, the Mavericks with Luka, for example. The Rockets with when they had James Harden. You have these teams that put all their, have this one lead offensive generator, and they surround them with 3-and-D guys because that seemed like it was the key. Because it was like, oh, we can't. This guy's got to be able to shoot because defenses are just going to ignore him. I feel like defenses are getting smarter now, and you need to be more than just a standstill spot up shooter now. Like we've seen that firsthand with the Mavericks, who loaded up their roster around Luka with guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Kleber, Reggie Bullock, even before, Seth Curry, these guys that mostly were known for just standstill spot up 3-point shooting. And that can work a little bit, but defenses are just smarter, man. They're running guys off the line better, and they're basically trying to take away what you do best. And you're seeing guys like Dorian, and you're seeing guys like Reggie Bullock, and even Tim. He had a really bad season inside the 3-point line this past season, despite his good 3-point shooting. You just can't survive if you've only got 1 or 2 guys that can drive the ball and dribble and attack. It doesn't matter if they're hitting 39% of their threes or not. So that's where I see Black as like, okay, he's maybe not going to be an elite shooter, but he's also not going to be someone that you can just, hopefully, if he develops the way you think he will, you're not going to be able to just take away one thing from his game and he's going to fall apart. Like he's just such a smart, intelligent player with a lot of skill in a variety of areas. He's not just someone who can run a pick and roll. He's not someone just who can cut. He's not just someone that can thread the needle with a pass, a swing pass, or whatever you need. So I'm seeing like teams need more guys like that, and I'm seeing that in the playoffs.
Well, Denver and Miami both, their offenses really flow. And you think about Golden State, and it's not just getting open threes. It's also like layups. Like Denver really won in the paint, even without sometimes Jokic wouldn't be doing it, but they got so many layups, just like Golden State. They stretch you out so much but it's also because their passing is really good. And I feel like the archetype or the system is Luka pressure the rim and then it gets open threes. But I feel like you kind of need the whole team to pressure the rim and that to create open threes. Otherwise, it's just too easy to stop and load up on in the playoffs.
Right. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just think, it would take more than one player to change that. But I do think that there's even with Taylor Hendricks, he's not going to be doing a lot of attacking closeouts and making connective passes. I think he'd be an awesome fit. I would be very happy if they got him. But even in that case, I would want like Josh Green to maybe get better so he can do some more of that connective passing.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're just, it just like we're seeing it just can't be Luka doing everything. And sometimes people misconstrue that and they're like, well, how many teams have like 5 point guards on the floor? And it's like, no, there's a difference between being a playmaker and being someone that can dribble and attack a closeout. You don't need to be a playmaker to be able to catch a swing pass, on the weak side corner or wing and just be able to take one or two hard dribbles toward the paint and make a play. Like that's not necessarily being like creating offense for other people, just being able to make that's like a simple basketball play.
Right.
I mean, not simple, but you know what I mean? It's not, there's a difference between being like a point guard, offensive creator, and someone that can just attack open space when it's presented to them.
I think that's actually part of what makes Hendricks so interesting, even though he doesn't have that skill set, is that if he eventually is a small ball 5, you have the leeway to have a guy on your team that can be an iffy spacer that can be amazing at everything else. Like if you had Draymond Green and Taylor Hendricks, that would be your closing front court, and that would be incredible. So you don't have to worry about the fact that you have this one guy that just kind of messes up Luka's thing. And so I think that's what makes Hendricks interesting, is that eventually I think he can close games at the 5, kind of like how Maxey did. And then from there, you don't have to worry as much about the fact that you would have a center and an Anthony Black in your lineup. And I think that's kind of the hidden value of Taylor Hendricks, is that like it's not just what he does, it's what it allows you to do like schematically. It's almost like an invisible like power that he has, that he allows on both ends of the court for you to do different things with your lineup. And so
he's so malleable.
Yeah, it's interesting that he wouldn't actively help the connective passing and help the creation around Luka, but the fact that you could play like a Josh Hart or a Bruce, like just name guys like that it's like they're not knockout shooters, but they do so many other things. So I do think that's a reason that he is very interesting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think he's my favorite of the – well, not maybe. I think Jarris Walker might be rising up there, but Walker's just kind of like – I'm trying to get him out of my brain. I don't think he's just going to be there. But Hendricks is always like, since the Mavericks – I knew the Mavericks were going to have 10, because that was like the early mock, like the very early mocks. Like when the regular season ended, Hendricks was always around that 10 to 12 area. So I've always kind of fallen in love with him. So this is a good stopping point. If you're listening live, we're just going to take a quick little pause. If you're listening on the recorded podcast, we're going to take a break to get some ads in. If you're listening on the recording, please, I beg of you, listen to the ads. I know it stinks, but with our new format, that is how we get paid for this. If you listen to the ads, we get paid. That's how it works. If you skip them, it's like you're not even... It's like you're not even, you don't even count. So apologies, but we're going to take a little break. If you're on the recording, just listen to some ads. We'll catch you on the other side. And then Logan, after this break, I think we should talk about, I want to talk to, or just ask you questions and talk about your favorite guys. If for some reason the top 9 goes chalk, and we'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Okay. We are back. We had some pretty good discussion in the first half of the pod, I think, talking about the top 9, kind of our feelings on where the Mavericks are going, with whether if they're going to trade it or not, how we kind of feel about that. Talked about some, Black and Hendricks, who I think are, two, at least me personally, 2 of my favorite guys. I know Logan likes them a lot. Now I want to talk more about what's going to happen if that top 9 goes the way consensus thinks about it. And this is the part where, Logan, I need to rely on you a lot more, because this is where I'm iffy. I just don't know enough about these guys. I don't watch enough college basketball during the season. I don't watch enough tape after the season. And I feel like, this is probably going to be the likely range the Mavericks pick, these range of guys 10 and below, 10 and below, that's outside of this top 9, because either the top 9 is going to go chalk, which I don't think it will, but if it does, or they're going to trade, they're going to trade the pick and trade down. So in this 10 to 15 range, have your thoughts changed from since the last time you talked to Kirk? Like, who is your favorite player outside of that top 9?
It's really hard because not all of them, I think, would be super helpful to the Mavs. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm pretty sure Kobe Buffkin is going to be good, and he plays really well off ball. But, like, I really want us to get a front court player, and you're not always supposed to draft for need. But I do believe that, like, fit can be a tiebreaker, because I just think there's a practicality to it, especially – a practicality to how that player develops, because they get like time and they can kind of explore what they are. Dick and Buffkin and certain players, not as interesting, but I do like Buffkin a lot. I know you've heard or read or stuff about Leonard Miller from me talking about him, it seems extremely unrealistic that we would take Leonard Miller, but he actually is someone that I like that high. It's like him and Buffkin. And I mean, I like Cason Wallace a lot, and I think it's kind of impossible for him not to help the Mavs in the minutes he plays, but there's only so many minutes. You know what I mean? So it just makes Cason Wallace sort of like, I would probably have him as like 11th or 12th or 13th, but that's what's problematic about that range. I almost wonder if the best argument you'd have is to take Coulibaly because of his upside at a position that we really need, that everyone in the NBA needs. Like, as a value proposition, I feel like he is a good thing to have. I mean, he probably have trade value before we even started playing NBA minutes because he's such a mystery as it is now. You know what I mean? It would be like, ooh, Coulibaly be like a Rodriguez Dubois or whatever.
And Coulibaly, I just want to say, like, it is so funny like, I heard about him and I was like, okay, I don't know anything about him. Like, someone talked to me like, hey, go watch some highlights. I watched the highlights and I know every one of these guys' YouTube highlights are amazing, but I was like, wait, what? Like, why is this guy, how is he not part of this top 9 conference? Like, what is going on? This guy looks incredible. Like, he's huge. He's long. Like, he's perfect. Like, what is going on? And then I look and I'm like, I step away from the YouTube highlights and I'm like, okay, what was his raw production? It's like, oh, he played like 15 minutes a game and he averages like, 8 points a game. I'm like, oh, okay. So he's just not playing a lot. Like you said, he's a mystery box.
Something I saw about him was, I can't remember how exactly it was put, but like if he was to go top 10, it would be the lowest amount of like offensive volume someone had since like Isaac Okoro was like the only other person. And then you saw how we've seen how that turned out, right? It's like guys who went in the top 10 with this low of like offensive volume. So I do think he would take a while. And I mean, that's something that we're talking about with the Mavs not wanting to do is take a while. So I guess that's actually why I've been open to trading down as long as we still get a young player and it seems like they care about who that young player is and they've scouted him appropriately and, yada, yada, because I don't think there's a perfect prospect that 10 of the top 9 is gone. And I do think it kind of flattens out. I think 10 to 15 is kind of a tier, and then 16 can go all the way back to like 30. And those are like rough numbers, but I wish I had a better answer because I think the Mavericks have particular fit issues but Buffkin, Coulibaly, I think are 2 of the best around there. I love Leonard Miller. If they traded back, I would love for them to get him, but I don't think he might not even go top 20. So that's a different set of conditions. The Grady Dick one,
I was going to ask about him next. I don't know how to feel about him.
The same way people are with centers, I kind of am about one-dimensional shooters. And I realize that not everyone feels that way. Like, a lot of people wouldn't say that, but just a personal team-building philosophy, I think that it is sort of that, like a running back in the NFL kind of concept. Unless, I mean, if a guy's going to be Klay Thompson, he's going to be Klay Thompson, but those things are outliers. And I don't know, I just wouldn't want, besides the defensive issues we have and how we want to help those issues, I just would feel that way about taking Dick at 10. But like I said, even though you're not supposed to draft for fit, I think the fact that you were about to sign Kyrie for 4 or 5 years, $200 million or whatever, and you have Luka, I would want to draft someone I felt like was going to be part of my best 5 at some point. So, like I said, if it's a tiebreaker, I kind of want to avoid someone who would mostly give us offense. Like, I don't know. If you absolutely think by far best player available, I guess I could see it, but it kind of just like stresses me out, the idea that we have this kind of lotto ticket. And it's going to be like, well, here's a guy that if he does pan out, our defense won't be good enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing about this pick and the pressure behind it is because even if the Mavericks don't have a successful offseason, this last season was such an outlier in terms of what happens when teams have players as good as Luka, as young as Luka is. The Mavericks could have a bad offseason and go roll in the next season. And Luka is so good, he could, and they played so many clutch games last season. Like, they could be an 8th or 9th seed play in, then get into the first round. And then you're not seeing another pick like this for the rest Luka's remainder of his contract. Even if they make some boneheaded moves, like it's really hard to get a top 10 pick when you have someone on your roster as good as Luka. So it really feels like they have to make it count. And with Dick, yeah, I just don't know enough. But I watch highlights and I'm like, is he just like a spot up guy? Like, does he have more to his game, like in terms of offensive capability? Does he project to be as bad at defense as we think, or is it more just he's not going to be a plus guy there?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be like a massive negative. Like he is, unfortunately, sneaky athletic. It has to be said about Grady Dick. But I mean, he's smart. He's sneaky athletic. He's 6'8". I mean, he's not. I mean, but he's very skinny, and it's just hard to imagine being like a real big positive. But I don't think he's going to be a complete negative. But just that kind of Klay Thompson, even like Kevin Huerter is somebody I see him compared to a lot. But Kevin Huerter is a lot more athletic than Dick. He's a lot better at taking it to the rim. I just don't think Grady Dick will take it from the perimeter all the way to the rim. He's going to attack some closeouts and make a quick pass. But I really think to get to that like 20-point score upside, Klay Thompson's an outlier of guys who don't dribble a bunch and pressure the rim to put up those kind of stats. Or you're not, 6'8" or above, which Dick said 6'8", but I guess like a plus athlete is the term I should use. But so I don't know. I guess that doesn't seem worth it to me, unless you think they have that upside.
Right. And this kind of came up in our Slack. I want to ask you this one. Okay, would you rather have Derek Lively or Noah Clowney out of Alabama?
They're extremely close to me. I have them both in the back end of the teens, and I think I would still want Derek Lively because Clowney, I mean, he'll take even longer than Lively, I think. And I think there's still some stuff with him that needs – he's like really raw. Like, I don't even think he's actually that good of a defender yet. Lively's actually like a really impactful defender who has some, how mobile is he and some different question marks. But, like, he is a good rim protector. Clowney is mobile enough and long enough and has crazy recovery speed, but he – makes mistakes, and you see him be out of position and all of those kinds of things. So I feel like there's a lot of projection with Clowney, but I also think a really smart team could take him because they might have a better idea of exactly, what he needs ironed out. Like he's right there at that Miami Golden State. Like there's kind of a couple of teams that I think are good at developing that also I could see putting him next to Bam or next to Draymond to where it like makes a lot of sense. And so if we did trade back, Clowney's interesting. It's just, that how long will they develop to be able to help thing is such a big question. But I do actually think Lively at least, even though I think he will take a lot of time to iron out the kinks of him fouling and him rolling to the rim, I do think he will help protect the rim, pretty quickly. Just like how valuable you think that is, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and if I'm reading this right, Clowney's still 18.
Yeah, that's part of the thing where he's that raw though, is he's like a baby. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes more sense than 18. Like, so he's gonna be 18 when he's drafted. So like I can imagine that has teams like, oh well, we can make him into whatever. Like he has like an extra 12 months on a lot of these guys that are being drafted.
And it didn't seem like he would be top 20, and then he got invited to that green room thing, and he got invited before they raised it to 25. So I was like, oh, he could go in the teens. But I think the fact that he can shoot and protect the rim, or that's what he theoretically can do. So sort of that Taylor Hendricks model, like the Mavs, it seems like someone they could be interested in because you would have to think with the way the Mavs prize 3-point shooting that they would like someone who profiles to have a shooting development, even if they are big guys. Then again, they signed JaVale McGee, so I don't know what Jason Kidd, how much he's changed the parameters of that, but
yeah. Something else I'm thinking about because I feel like we've kind of covered at least the guys outside of the top 9 that makes sense. I'm looking at some other names. I know Casey Wallace is very popular. I know Keontae George is a popular name for that range, but again, the thing you've said, you're like, all these guys, they're not wings, like they're guards. And it's not that they wouldn't help. It's just like, it is kind of crazy how after that top 9, the wings, it's a noticeable drop to the next tier of like 6'6" and 6'8" guys.
But trading back, if they traded back to 21 and 22, like hypothetically, and like I know there's also like the idea they could get Dorian Finney-Smith, but just like scratch the value aspect of it. Imagine they get, or 26 and 29 from Indiana. Just imagine they get a certain good player. There's a lot of wings in that range. They're just all flawed offensively. They don't have the like creation upside to go top 15, top 20. But I think that's part of why I'm a little bit okay with trading down. You could get one of those wings who have upside at being really good defenders, and you could also take a 22 or 23-year-old that you think can help your depth now. So I'm not really advocating for that as much as I think if that top 9 is gone, it's not that crazy. But I know it kind of hurts because you're like, man, Tyrese Halliburton got taken at 11th or 12th. Like Jalen Williams last year got taken at 12th. And like someone could be right about that. If someone was like, no, take Kobe Buffkin at 10, he's that good. I'm just not sure if I particularly believe that, even though I think the top 9 itself is super strong. And because I don't think they'll take Leonard Miller. So.
I got a couple more names now that you've because I'm kind of going through this some lists here, and you're right. Once you get, it's like top 9, a lot of wings, then like 10 to 20, a lot of guards, and then like 20 to 35, it's like all wings again.
Yeah.
What do you think about if this is Mavs trade down scenario, which I'm trying to like cope with because I feel like that's going to happen because that's what I'm hearing. What about Derek Whitehead? What do you feel about him? Because there are some people that I trust, very smart draft people that I trust, that have him in their personal big boards, like in that 10 to 12 range.
Yeah, I was about to say that when the Hawks rumor of getting 15, I feel like there's a lot of people that would be like, Whitehead's someone you could take at 15. I mean, he's a really good catch and shoot guy, like really, really good. But the high school tape is so much different than the college tape because he got injured before the college year. And he is so much more fluid and able to attack in the high school tape and better at defense kind of by extension because his fluidity and movement is so much better that I think, I'd be really curious to see what he does in workouts, but teams will have that advantage. But like he was much, much different. He kind of just looked like a guy who looked to fit the part, who was really good at catch and shoots in college, but kind of inefficient if he tried to drive in. But in high school, he was supposed to be a top 5, top 10 pick going into the year. So, I do kind of like him just because I think there is some like upside, and I think he would fit well because of the catch and shoot, and he's kind of built to guard, to play the 3 sometimes. He's not the biggest 3. I think that maybe that's something about him is that, he's not, I don't know. I guess he's about small forward size, but yeah, I wouldn't mind that, especially if they got back to 2021, 22. I thought you were going to ask about Omax Prosper. I feel like he's one people are talking about a lot.
Oh yeah, I've seen his name a lot. I don't know much. Can you give me the elevator pitch on him?
Let me letting my dog out. Sorry.
It's all good.
So he's 6'8". He's really long. His shooting's a little bit iffy, but he has that like true wing size. The thing about him that I was kind of scared off by is that his block numbers were like outrageously low, like 5 blocks a year for a 6'8" guy who's long. And that's usually
a 7'1" wingspan.
Yeah, that's usually a terrible sign for those kind of people. Like they always talk about the defensive event creation being this like kind of really, really telling stat. But he chased shooters around screens in like a lot. And he guarded guards a lot. And the fact the 6'8" guy, they were like sick him on guards. They did it over and over. Jordan Hawkins, he covered Jordan Hawkins and gave him trouble, who was like the best movement shooter in the draft. And it's not close as far as like running around screens and stuff. And so I was a little scared of the fact that he didn't block shots a lot, but that does kind of explain it. His shot is coming along. I don't think he's like that great of a shooter, but that does seem like the kind of guy the Mavs could really use as a really switchable 6'8" guy. And just that long wingspan. He really bothers people when he gets switched onto him. And so he's definitely someone I wouldn't mind if they took him in the 20s. I think it seems like we have pretty good success with like helping guys develop as shooters, especially when you take a lot of open ones from Luka and you shoot a lot of corner threes as well. So he would make sense to me. Like if they got him and Whitehead, it would be hard for me to be like, this is so much worse than taking Grady Dick. You know what I mean? Like just because of what just because of what their archetypes point to. You know what I mean? Or what they would particularly possibly offer.
Right. Okay. Well, that helps me a lot personally. And yeah, I think you're making me feel better about the trade down because I did not realize how many wings there were in that 20 to 30 range. So if they do somehow manage to, the thing that I'm worried about is I can like, if they can get two, like Brooklyn has those 2 picks. If they can turn 10 into 2 low firsts, I think I feel a lot better about having 2 swings at the apple there than like if they trade down and they only get 1 pick in the low 20s because I don't know, there's something about it that just makes me nervous about only having if they're only going to have 1 pick in this draft.
And I mean, I think
going
generally
from 10 to 20, just in the 20s, it just feels like a really big gamble unless they're really getting a good veteran.
I think trading down is often like not smart too. Like if you trade down from 2 to 5, it just seems like that always messes up. I thought I was about to say something really analytical, but like anytime teams like think they're smarter and, it's just like take this guy that like if Charlotte trades down because they don't want to have to make the choice of drafting Scoot, like it's like that kind of thing always ends up being stupid. But a lot of times teams know what they're doing. I guess I should give the Mavericks the benefit of the doubt all the time. But yeah, there is a lot of guys back there. Noah Clowney could still be back there. That could be somewhere that you could actually take Leonard Miller. You could take Jamie Jaquez, because it's just because he's 23 and you think he can help now. I kind of think he might be like too slow, but apparently all the workouts he's like destroying. And he's shooting really well, which he took a lot of like tough shots in college. So everybody's kind of saying he seems like a Memphis Grizzly, which totally makes sense that they would get like the 23-year-old just All-American who actually is so smart he figures it out that everybody else is like, I don't know about that. But
they get tall Desmond Bane.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. Okay. This is the last thing I want to end on. We've talked about the top 9 a bunch, and usually when we talk about the top 9 and we talk about someone falling, it's Jarris Walker, it's Taylor Hendricks, it's Anthony Black. I feel like the top 4 feels, Victor, Brandon Miller, Scoot, and I feel like Amen Thompson is a lock for like at least 4 or 5.
Seems like the Rockets are.
Yeah, and what I've read about Amen Thompson, like, I mean, there are people that are like, he's like elite athlete doesn't begin to describe him. Yeah. Like he's the athlete, like outside of like LeBron in terms of like draft prospects. Like his measurables are off the chart. His brother is Sir Thompson. I've seen some ranges where he can go as high as 5. And I have seen some people think that he could, maybe not in mocks, but in personal big boards, see him in that 10 range, like 10 or 11.
Him and Whitmore both.
Yeah. Give me your thoughts on if the Mavericks gets 10 and it's not Hendricks, it's not Black, it's not Walker that it's available, but it's it's Whitmore or a Sir Thompson who are just I don't think it's going to happen, but I feel like there's a possibility.
Yeah, like a 5 to 10% chance or something.
Yeah, and I feel like we just don't talk about that with the Mavericks at all because the conversation has been so dominated by those 3 guys, which I really like them, and I'm sure I am swaying that conversation a little bit. I'm a big voice in Mavericks media. What do you think if somehow they get to 10 and one of those 2 guys, Asur or Whitmore, are there? Like, is that just take the money and run and don't tell everybody?
I think even with the question marks, I think it is. The way a lot of people feel about Anthony Black, which I still like Anthony Black well enough to take him at 10, but the way people who might have him at 5, 6, or 7, I feel I've kind of soured on Sir Thompson a little bit compared to where, like, for a little while I was one of the people who are like, he's not very far off from his brother, but I do see them kind of a different class, and I might have Asar at like 7 or 8. But the way people see Anthony Black is this like extremely connective passer because of his court sense and also an elite defender. I think Asar will end up being that. I mean, the shot's still iffy, but I don't think he has necessarily anywhere close to the star potential his brother has, because his brother is, like you said, a truly, truly like 1% athlete. But Asar, I just love those Iguodala types who are like so smart, but also guard the best guy in the court. I mean, that's kind of what Black is like too, and that's why I was kind of so into Black. It's just like, I know they don't necessarily fit with Luka, but but it's also at the same time exactly what a team with Luka needs, because you need to have the ball moving and you need someone to guard to be like a true defensive player of the year type candidate. Asar's problem is probably that I think his offensive floor is maybe a little bit lower than even I would want to admit, because his shooting is a little iffy, but he's a better shooter than Amen, but it's still kind of questionable. And he doesn't quite have the mid-range game you'd want to see from someone who doesn't have the long-range shot. But Black doesn't really either. I guess really honestly my pitch, if I was like keep Asar, is that I think it's a lot of the same reasons we've talked about how we could sell ourselves on Anthony Black, but in a higher ceiling package. I think just like a better athlete. But Whitmore is not even a question. I would just be so angry if they could get Whitmore. I mean, I guess the reason, because there's been talk about him falling.
Yeah.
And the only
Apparently, I've got up Kevin O'Connor just before you get into it.
Go ahead.
I've got up Kevin O'Connor's latest mock draft. He's got him at 9, which again, like he had been mocked so long, like between 5 and 7. So to see him at 9 at a major source, I don't know what that means. But in his little blurb, he says sources have been telling him that there's a potential fall for him because he's been having poor workouts. And what O'Connor is trying to figure out is it actual poor workouts, or is it smoke screens, or is he trying to like finagle himself into the right to the right team? Didn't think of that. Before we we'll go into it, like people might be like, well, like Whitmore's not going to be there. Like I'm just saying that's what some of the reporting saying. Who knows if it's bullshit or not? But I just kind of want to entertain the possibility, because why not? Yeah. It's fun. Like it's fun.
Well, so his weakness is, and I think why he could potentially be falling, he definitely would not have a bad workout where his shirt's off and he's dunking. Like he's an insanely powerful athlete. He's kind of like a Miles Bridges, Jaylen Brown, like power wing athlete, where it's like, even though he's only 6'7", you feel like he's 6'9". He's really broad-shouldered and like goes up strong, and he also can get past guys. He's so sudden. Like the marriage of suddenness and power is insanely rare. And I kind of love guys like that. I kind of love, that kind of driver and guy who's already filled out. But he had a negative assist to turnover ratio, and he just had a really bad sense of the court. And I was thinking if he was having bad workouts, it could be because they do 3-on-3s and 5-on-5s, and they might be trying to teach you a certain action or idea and asking you to kind of repeat it or build upon it. And I wonder if that's why he's struggling, which I kind of hate to do that. There's just something kind of like NFL drafty about like, this was this guy's Wonderlic test that I don't really like about like the idea of people's intellectual capacities to learn stuff. But I do know that the problems that he had with processing the game, and I wonder if that's starting to just scare teams too much. The way I put it is like when you play pickup basketball and there's that guy, you know what I mean, who just maybe the most talented person, but he kind of just tears your team apart. And it's like, I wonder if teams feel like he could be that. But as a Maverick, if you're next to Luka and Kyrie, I mean, I don't know if you're going to have to be thinking about that much. Pretty sure they're just going to get a lot of dunks and a lot of space and a lot. It's kind of like Benedict Mathurin was kind of similar to this, and he was pretty poor on defense and had a lot of flaws. But like the shoot threes and go in there and dunk aspect, Whitmore, I think, would be able to do pretty quickly. And with all that athleticism, he's a really good like defensive playmaker too, or just kind of, I guess he projects to be. I mean, it's hard to imagine he wouldn't be somewhat good on defense unless he didn't care at all, because he has that kind of athleticism.
Right. Something I'm curious about with him, like you talk like everything that I hear about him, he's such a monster, powerful athlete, and then you kind of look at his college numbers, and it's like, and it's like, is there question, like, again, this is sounding so NFL drafty. I hate it.
Yeah, now that I brought it up.
I know, now it's stuck in my head. But are there motor issues with him?
See, that's the thing, is it doesn't seem like there are, and that's another reason why I haven't minded as much these kind of like, I mean, he only had like literally 30 assists on the season. Like that stuff starts to make people have an idea of, and that number could be way off, but I know it was a really shockingly low number. And that can start to give people the idea that this guy may have a low motor. I feel like people might equate like having a low feel for the game for also having a low motor. Those things are usually pretty connected, where it's like you work really hard and you also have a really good intuitive sense of basketball. But he has a high motor. Like he plays really hard, just and physical. and especially in the international games that he took part in, like the under 19 games, he was better about all of that stuff in those games. Like he was a better passer. He seemed like he made more sense in a team context, and I wonder how much of it was he came into college injured. Villanova kind of had a certain like sixth man role for him. Maybe he couldn't learn the system. Like there's all these kind of questions with the small sample size of a college year. So I wonder how much of that has to do with it. But I don't think that's the thing about the workouts where I don't necessarily think it's NFL drafty is that you don't think that he is like that. You don't think it's like a character concern. It might just be more of a processing the game concern.
And also, yeah, if in these workouts, if he's doing like they don't do like 5-on-5 scrimmaging in these workouts, I don't think, with these guys at this tier. Like you said, it's like 3-on-3.
Yeah.
Or it's like a lot of walkthrough stuff, or it's like just like doing drills with coaches against air.
Well, imagine
like, he probably sticks out more, like, because like you said, he just uses his power and athleticism to kind of eat garbage buckets and get offensive boards. And
well, think
and
about
like
what
that.
You were talking about, what we were talking about with like the NBA changing to wanting a lot of like processing and quick decision makers and making the ball move. Think about like Anthony Black is the guy kind of rising here at the last second. From what I hear, like he could go at 6, and then Hendricks and Whitmore seem to be the guys like over the past few days that most seem like they could be there at 10. And I feel like they're the two guys who are the least intuitive basketball players. Like they have the least feel, whereas almost everybody in the top 6 or 7 are like true playmakers. I mean, even Brandon Miller's like a decent passer. So I just kind of start to wonder if that's somewhere the NBA is going, and if that's also the way, drafting would follow suit. Is like if you don't have a really good sense of how to make plays for others, it might be like a real ding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because you look at the guys that are rising, like the Thompson twins, Black, even Jarris, Kobe Buffkin.
Yeah, Jarris and Hendricks were neck and neck, but now it's like it seems like there's pretty clearly a gap, and it's like Walker is sort of he's like Aaron Gordon-ish, like he has that connected passing, intelligent, cutting aspect to his game.
Yeah, for sure, and that's starting to make a lot of sense. And the cool thing, I mean, I don't know, the thing about the Mavericks that I think, like, I mean, if I were the agent, if I were one of these guys, I would be like blowing up my agent's phone to be like, how can I like. Okay, I might be able to get drafted 8th. Can I get drafted 10th? Because like I'm thinking about how all these guys, because this conversation I can't remember who I had it with. I had it with someone the other day, and I was like, we talk about these guys so much. I feel like we don't talk about where they go enough, and I feel like where they go is almost as important as who they are. And like you look at Dallas's situation, even if Kyrie doesn't resign, which he probably is, like Luka. He just makes things so much easier. And you look at what he's done with guys with like Dorian Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleber, I love you guys, love Reggie Bullock. Like their skill level is not even close to what some of these guys in the top 9, top 10 are in terms of like where they were, like where Dorian was as a 19-year-old compared to where Cam Whitmore is. Like it's not even close. And you saw what Luka was able to turn those guys into, because he can make the game really easy for him because of how good he is processing the game and controlling the game. And like part of me is like when Anthony Black, he goes to the Wizards and like it doesn't work out because Beal's not there, and he's forced into a lead guard role, and maybe he's not ready for that. And people are like, well, he was a bust. But it's like, well, what if he went to Dallas and he doesn't have to do that? And he kind of like, I just think about how these guys, if they could come to Dallas and some of their weaknesses don't necessarily apply, because it's like, okay, Whitmore, he maybe doesn't process the game as well, maybe doesn't make his teammates better as a passer. He doesn't need to do that right away in Dallas. Neither does Taylor Hendricks. Like they just need to shoot, score, rebound, and play defense. And it's like, part of me is like, man, I would be calm, because like these guys will get paid. Their second contracts, they will get absolutely paid if they're playing next to Luka for 4 years.
Well, it starts to be like a chicken or the egg kind of thing, or a double-edged sword, where it's like, is it better to go to Washington, put up like Anthony Black could have 8 rebounds and 8 assists a game, let's say, on Washington, and the team's terrible, and his next contract, people are like, oh, that's not replicable. It wouldn't actually help winning. And it's like, are you going to get paid more doing that, or are you going to get paid more having lower stats on a team in the semifinals the Western semis or whatever. So I have thought about it because I've seen people be like, why would Anthony Black ever want to go to Dallas? He would be this off-ball guy, and he wouldn't get to like run offense. But there's other people that are like, I don't think he will ever be good enough to be running offense. So it's how good of a wing can he be? And so it's kind of like I've been thinking more and more of that, of like which side is right, because I feel like some people think of it more as like what gives the player the most volume, and the other one is like what makes the player be part of winning the most, and how would that translate to his earnings? You know what I mean?
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. And all I can go off of is just looking at the guys Luke has gotten paid. And it's everyone. Jalen Brunson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleba, Dwight Powell's still here getting NBA money. Like, and I like Dwight Powell. Like, I'm not even trying to make that much of a dig on him. But, like, every guy that's been here, like, their next contract after playing with Luka is more than you would, like, Dorian Finney-Smith isn't getting the contract he has now if he wasn't playing next to, like, I love Dorian, but like, and his story. But if he was doing what he was doing in Brooklyn for 4 years, he would not be getting the contract he has right now. So,
well, a good one for Hendricks is like, think about if Jabari Smith was on the Mavs.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like everybody would be like, oh, this is what we thought he'd be. He just nails threes. You know what I mean? And
and now everyone's calling like, oh, is he a bust after like 1 year playing in the most dysfunctional organization in the NBA in terms of like having an NBA product. So yeah, that's also why like trading the pick drives me nuts, because I feel like the Mavericks have a cheat code with Luka where guys that are picked in the top 10 are usually going to bad rosters, bad situations.
Yeah, it's true.
Not a lot of rookies get to play with someone like Luka. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like, well, maybe rookies, but like, you know, like Josh Green rookies. I'm talking about like guys with top 10 talent do not get to play with guys like Luka or Kyrie. Like, even Kyrie makes his teammates better. I saw, you know, Kyrie moves the ball as well. Like, for all that I don't like about Kyrie, I don't want to get into it, but like on the floor, like he basically did exactly everything you wanted him to as a secondary offensive guard. So like, I'm just imagining like, man, like Taylor Hendricks could go to Washington and be like you said, like he could be the next Jabari Smith, or he could come to Dallas and maybe he doesn't have the volume, but he could be shooting like 37% from three and averaging like 15 and 8 and being on a team that, you know, goes the second round. Like you said, I'm just like, I don't want them to trade down. Like, I'm tired of them picking from the island of misfit toys. I want a top, like, there's just a part of my brain that's like, give me a top 10 talent to put next to Luka, like, and let him supercharge that guy even more than they already is. So
the way you're putting it makes me be like, because I was like, no, it can be okay if they trade. And now that when you put it that way, I'm like, we haven't had like true blue chip talent on this freaking team with Luka. Like, can we just get? That's why the Ayton thing, which I know we won't have time to go into, but that's why, even though it's like the price, he's flaky, he's this, he's that. It's like, I don't know, he's the most talented freaking guy. You know what I mean? It's just
that's available. Yeah,
yeah,
that makes sense. And again, like we've gone an hour. We need to get out of here. But like I've softened my stance a little bit, because at first I thought the only way you can get Ayton was trading 10, and I'm just like, no, please no. But if they can get him without trading 10, and then you're setting yourself up for quite an offseason. But that's a conversation for another time, probably. Let's get out of here. Logan, thank you again for coming on. Yeah, this has been great. Like, again, the draft, I can't watch all these guys. I don't have time. I don't watch college basketball.
Did you watch Leonard Miller? Have you seen him?
I mean, YouTube highlights, but like all these guys' YouTube highlights look awesome.
He's the funkiest player ever.
Yes, he is. His jumper is weird.
It's very weird. It's very weird.
It's like a push shot. I don't know how to describe it, but I also didn't know he was left-handed. So when he first shot his first jumper, I was kind of like,
"What is this?"
Yeah, I don't know if that made it look weirder than it is, but you've sold me on him. If they take him in the 20s, if they trade down, I'll be cheerleader right next to you. So Logan, again, thanks for joining. Guys, we're running up on it. The draft is June 22nd, this Thursday. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of posts on MavsMoneyball.com. We're going to have reaction podcasts. I don't know if we're going to do what we did with the lottery and like do a live show while the picks are happening. I just don't think my brain can do that while I'm trying to get posts and stuff on the site. But we will definitely be here live with a live recording of our podcast, breaking down whatever it is they do, because we're finally going to get something. Something's going to happen. They're going to draft a player. They're going to trade it. All the speculation goes away. Thursday evening, we'll finally have some real meaty news and analysis to dive into. So, again, Logan, thanks again. We will talk to you guys again sometime Thursday night. Listen to Pod Maverick. This is Josh Bowe, also editor over at MavsMoneyball.com. We'll talk to you guys later.